So here's a little detail on the DCDC connector update. So as you can see, here's the back of the connector. There's the kind of the back shells, the stuff you want to get on the cable beforehand, even though I have the other end available. But since I am doing a couple things here that probably isn't super recommended, but I am doing them anyways, this connector actually has two larger pins and two smaller pins, and I'm only using the two larger pins in this application. So those two smaller pins, they go straight through. The other thing I'm doing is the cable that I'm using is a high voltage motor, like phase cable. So it's got 3 conductors in it, and I'm only using 2 of them. So there is a third conductor down in there, and I've basically RTV'd this whole connection. So the idea is that it's completely watertight once that RTV sets. And even though there's a gland and there's a back shell, and the other side of the connector is gasketed to the DCDC, that there's no way that water could get through this connection. I mean, there still is a way. You can have the water wick through the copper. If you have some other intrusion point, you can have the water literally wick into the ends of the copper and then work its way all the way down the cable and through the connector and into whatever you're using. So in our application for the DOKA, we are going through a gland on the other side that seals watertight to the PDM. So it's highly unlikely that any water is going to get into this cable, but in the case that it does, I'm kind of taking all precautions that I can. And that's part of the, I learned that from an issue a few years ago where we had a similar sort of setup where the cable connection was completely watertight. I mean, it was a, brand name Tyco connector, and the other end of it was our, AC input for a charger. And we had water get into the end of the cable that was about this long, and it went from the charging port at the front of the vehicle down through a big loop and then down into the charger. And because there's, these connections are watertight on the outside, but not, to each pin, it essentially filled the charger up with water. And that wasn't a huge issue. We had some basic charging faults. I think we had some ground faults, which are expected with that sort of scenario. And the vehicles just wouldn't charge. And so the service team went and pulled the chargers. And when they removed the chargers from the vehicle, water just poured out of the connector. And that is something that I have never forgotten. And so we did a service patch where we would, same sort of thing here, where we RTV and then adhesive heat shrink, and just seal it up, and we didn't have any problems after that. So in this application where I've got unused cavities, extra conductors, I'm gonna just play it safe and seal it up. And I have extras of the pins and the connectors in case I mess it up or I have to do it again, but it shouldn't be a problem.